In tonight's story, a taxidermist gets his just desserts at the hands of a few good dogs. Our 13th caller calls this story, Barking Dogs Don't Bite. Alright, caller, you're on the air.
Marvin unloaded the dead dog from the passenger seat of his V8 Ford, wrapped in a towel so it wouldn't shed on the leather interior. He laid the body on the workbench in the garage and unwrapped the towel to reveal his prize. His favorite breed, a dachshund. Imagine his joy when his neighbors returned home one day with 2 of them. He failed to nail both dogs, but one was better than none. And there was always the next time, of course. He would have to wait. The weeks following the successful hunt were risky. The neighborhood would be on edge, usually blame the disappearance on a wild animal, and shoot the first coyote or raccoon that they saw. Then things would settle down. It never failed. Still, the botched snatch and grab bothered him. In his prime, it wouldn't have been a problem. He'd bring home 3 or 4 animals a night. But he was old and now with a bad back. Mistakes were more common. He checked his watch. 10 till 6. 1 minute behind. Marvin left the garage and headed upstairs to his bedroom. He changed into his hobby clothes, black slacks with suspenders, over a pressed white shirt and a small black bow tie. He wanted to look nice for his beauties. For the past 30 years, Marvin stuck to his routine. With the dedication of a priest, his art was a religious experience. It was how he communed with God, how he understood the magic of creation and his purpose as an artist. Marvin adjusted his bow tie and left his room. 30 years of artistry watched in silent reverence as he descended the staircase. A zoological history of the neighborhood pets. German Shepherds, Corgis, Rottweilers, and Dobermans displayed with grace and beauty. They no longer needed to eat or bark, or Marvin shuddered at the thought. Poop. Such undignified behavior. The only attention they required was an occasional dusting. He thought back on the years that he'd spent mastering his craft. There were bumps and missteps along the way, and some animals went to waste in the name of progress. But this gallery showcased his dedication, a tribute to his perfection. And now he would add a dachshund. He always wanted a dachshund. He entered the garage and closed the door behind him. The 3 plastic tubs stacked on a bowed shelf above the door shuttered. Scribbled in Sharpie on the sides were the words keepsakes, notes and papers, and trophies, mementos of his youth. He'd meant to take care of those tubs years ago. Now they were too heavy, and he didn't trust his legs on a ladder. He would have to wait until the shelf collapsed. Until then, he'd be wary. Marvin circled the Ford to his workbench and opened the window above it. The summer breeze carried the smell of fried chicken from some nearby restaurant into the garage. He checked his watch. 7:31. He took the timer from above his workbench and set it for 2 hours and 29 minutes, then laid it next to the tray of knives and shears. Everything he'd need for the skinning process. Marvin selected a small knife from the tray and slid the blade up the dog's stomach, carefully, not to puncture the organs. From there, he lifted the flap and cut along the edge. His knife moved in short, quick slices that separated the connective tissue from the muscle and pelt. While he didn't enjoy the scent of the raw meat mixed with fried chicken, he found it comforting. 9:59 came, and the timer beeped. Marvin exhaled, rubbed the soreness from his eyes, and admired his progress. He'd accomplished little with the allotted time, but he didn't mind. He wanted to savor this piece. Marvin wrapped the dog in its towel and carried it to the commercial freezer at the back of the garage. He opened the lid and laid the body across a pile of frozen dogs. Previous victims he had yet to find time to discard. "Such a good boy," he said as he ran his hand over the dog's toweled head, then closed the lid. He cleaned his workspace, shut off the light, and went to bed. Marvin dreamed as he laid in his bed. His bedroom was cold, illuminated by blue light that was neither lamplit nor moonlit, but an unnatural glow that hung in the air like a mist. At the base of the bed, a dachshund. He ignored the dog and rolled over onto his side. But the box became faster, now a shrill yapping. Marvin lurched upright and threw his pillow at the dog. "Shut up!" He missed. The dog barked. Marvin jumped out of his bed and grabbed for the dog, but the dachshund danced out of reach. It barked again. Marvin's temper surged. He kicked at the dog, swung his fist, but he was too slow. He cast his age. If only he were younger, he'd catch and strangle the life out of the mutt. The barks grew louder, more insistent. They stung his ears. Then the dog opened his mouth, and out came a sound of metal crashing to the ground. Marvin jerked awake. He sat up in his bed, wiped the sweat from his face, and then ran his hand through his hair. A nightmare. He checked his watch. 4:36. Still morning. Downstairs, the dog barked. He wrapped himself in his bathrobe and crawled out of bed. He opened the bedroom door and peered into the hallway. Thin beams of moonlight lit the landing and the staircase. It was empty. He eased himself out of the bedroom and descended the stairs. From within the gloom of the room below, he could see the glass eyes of the taxidermy dogs reflect the pale light. To him, they looked like a pack of hungry animals. And for a moment, he imagined the culprit hiding amongst the stuffed bodies, waiting to maul him. These thoughts were new to him and had come easily in the dark. His art had never frightened him before. He didn't like it. His eyes strayed from the pets for a moment and stopped at the garage door. It was open. From the inside, he heard a bark. "I've got you!" Marvin stepped into the garage and closed the door behind him. The tubs trembled. He didn't notice. He could hear the staccato click of the sprinklers and smell the fresh wet grass. Outside the open window, Marvin grunted. Must be how the mud got in. The workbench below the window, left clean and organized, now was cluttered with debris. From the shelf above his work area, a jug of optimaline set on its side, dripping into the swollen foam sheets strewn across the tabletop. At the base of the workbench lay the tool tray, shears and knives soaked in formaldehyde among shards of shattered bottle. An explosion of alum covered the V8 like a thin layer of snow. The dogs have been busy. His forehead was wrinkled, and he'd chew on the side of his tongue. The dog might still be in the garage, and if it was a decent size, there was little he could do to defend himself. He'd need a weapon. With his eyes focused on the room and a hand on the hood of the car, he circled the Ford to where his tools lay scattered. Somewhere a bucket fell. He jumped and pressed himself against the grill. The boxes and shelving units transformed ink blots before him, and he saw a silhouette of the dog in each one. Marvin's lips quivered. Sweat cooled his brow. He was frightened. Why, he'd taken many dogs. What changed? The answer came to him. Control. He'd always had control. He understood his dogs and when and where to take them. Without his traps, knives, and syringes, he was nothing. A pitiful old man. No, he told himself. You're not too old. Not yet. He swallowed hard, choking down the lump in his throat. His eyes were trained on the garage. Marvin reached a shaky hand towards the tools. His fingers grazed over the shears and the scalpels, careful to avoid the shards of glass, until he settled on the buck knife. A cold huff of air chilled Marvin's hand. He looked up. The dark amber eyes of his unfinished dachshund glared back. The dog's mouth was hovered over his hand. Its tongue flicked between its teeth. Ropes of saliva slapped the ground. Marvin wasn't aware of the tremors in his body. Water vapor drifted into the slender strands of crisp pelt draped over the dog's sleek, muscular body. The other dogs that Marvin stored in his freezer stood behind the dachshund. Skinless, blind monsters, composed of frozen muscle, fat, bone, an exhale of air squeezed between his lips in a high-pitched whine. Marvin's heart hammered in his chest. Instinct took over. He thrust the knife into the neck of the dachshund. The tip bounced off the frozen cords of muscle. The dog lunged. Teeth crunched down on his hand. He cried out and dropped his knife. The dachshund whipped its head around side to side. Its mouth locked on the crippled hand. Teeth ripped the skin, clipped the bones, and opened arteries. Blood and adrenaline pumped. Marvin pulled his hand from the dog's mouth and clutched the ruined appendage to his chest. He was on his feet, running for the garage door, but the dogs were on him. Their frozen teeth sank into his thigh, his calf, and rump. Nerves fired their electric crackle, snapped across his body. Marvin slammed into the door. The shelf above gave way, and the tubs collapsed. Their lids were open, showering him with keepsakes and memories of bygone years. He struck the ground, and his hips shattered beneath the weight of his youth. The back of his neck met the Ford's hubcap. There was no pain. The dogs watched to see if Marvin would move. When he didn't, the dachshund pounced and tore into Marvin's stomach. The rest of the pack joined in, burying their snouts in the old man's intestines, gobbling the ropes of pink meat. A large Rottweiler pushed his way in the front of the pack. Stuck to its side was a freezer-burned Pomeranian that growled and snapped at the air. The Rottweiler forced his enormous head beneath Marvin's rib cage. Its jaws crunched through the cartilage and bone. There was a pop. Then Marvin couldn't breathe. With a quick shake of its head, the dog tore the left lung from Marvin's chest, swallowing it with a wet chomp. Through blurry eyes, he looked at the memorabilia surrounding him and smiled. He coughed and cleared his throat of enough blood to manage a whisper. If I were in my prime, he died before he could finish the sentence. The dogs were too busy enjoying their meal to hear him.
Thanks for calling. If you ask me, Marvin was one sick puppy. He positively deserved his fate at the hands of those popsicle pups. Bon appetit. Well, that's it for the show. If you enjoyed this month's episode, give me a like and subscribe. It really helps the channel. And don't be afraid to say hi in the comments below. As for me, I'll be waiting right here for the next 13th caller.